Bam Bam's gonna kill me with those weights!
Barney, please.
Despite what the stigma of animation tells you, The Flintstones was never a kid show. It was a show aimed at adults on prime time, much like The Simpsons or Family Guy. Though as time went on, the animation studio behind The Flintstones, Hanna-Barbera, started marketing its new and old cartoons more towards children. Many blamed them for creating the cartoons are for kids mindset, but that's another story. Always remember, just because a cartoon's appropriate for kids doesn't mean it's only for kids. Today, we're going to talk about, so far, 4 attempts at the Flintstones recapturing that adult demographic. It's Juice and Jam time. We'll have a good old time.
Hello, Freddy.
After the original Flintstones ended, they went from promoting cigarettes to cereal. There was a long list of spin-offs or specials meant for kids or families, but the breaking point came during the 90s when Hanna-Barbera went through the baby reboot phase. Yo Yogi, Tom and Jerry Kids, Flintstones Kids, and a pup named Scooby-Doo, which started the trend. Who would win in a fight? A pup named Scooby-Doo, a boy named Charlie Brown, a tribe called Quest, or a pimp named Slickback? Place your bets. Other than Scooby-Doo, this trend of kid reboots didn't take off, though networks will keep trying regardless. So Hanna-Barbera next tried the opposite and aimed towards the adult who grew up with these brands. Space Ghost Coast to Coast, C-Lab 2021, Harvey Birdman Attorney at Law, a PG-13 Josie and the Pussycats movie, and almost a PG-13 Scooby-Doo movie before they last minute cut it to PG. Among these reimaginings was the 2001 TV movie The Flintstones on the Rocks.
All right, Wilma, let's stop with all the theatrics, or I might be forced to tell a little secret I know about you.
Oh, yeah, Fred? What?
Wilma Flintstone, a natural redhead?
It's a more dramatic take as Fred and Wilma are dealing with their marriage currently on the rocks. To patch up their relationship, they take a trip to Roxico, like Mexico, where Fred must learn to love again and not be a fucking racist.
It's written in Spanish, Fred.
What do you mean, Spanish?
We're in Acapulco, Fred. It's a Spanish-speaking city. Please, no.
Only the rebels could have brought us somewhere all backwards.
Up yours, Fred. If you can tell from the more wonkier designs, many of the crew members behind Dexter and Powerpuff Girls worked on this. That thick outline look of the 90s Cartoon Network era was influenced by classic Hanna-Barbera, so we came full circle. Thanks to the imperfection of cell animation, it gives me that effect I feel when watching Batman the Animated Series, where they both try and succeed at a 50s, 60s retro feel. There's something cozy and elegant both about the retro style and the slow burn theatrical pace. Also, I just admire this short stop-motion sequence where Fred dreams about an affair. It's reminiscent of the quieter season 1 Simpsons, except Pebbles and Bam Bam aren't present. I wonder if they haven't been born or they simply grew up and moved out. Though it seems like the special wasn't sure what it wanted to be or who it was made for. Thematically, it's more mature, has some edgier jokes, but it just wasn't inappropriate enough to be on Adult Swim, yet not lively enough for kids. The pacing can feel monotonous as some jokes drag on way too long. There's also this wacky jewel thief subplot I feel clashes with the somber tone. Had this become a series, the movie doesn't give me a good idea what it would have been like, and maybe the network felt the same. Cartoon Network played Flintstones on the Rocks only once, with no reruns or home video releases. No reasons I can find, but maybe it was due to the topic of divorce. It reminds me of the band Sesame Street episode titled Snuffy's Parents Get a Divorce. Not the most subtle episode title.
FuckExtremeMusic.com.
The 1992 Self-Explained episode never aired, as many of the kids in the test screening thought because their parents are fighting, that means they're getting a divorce too. So Sesame Street to this day has the episode hidden away. Maybe having Fred and Wilma in a whole melancholy TV movie about the topic was too real. Flintstones on the Rocks is a rocky start to what could have been a more edgy TV series. Had they continued with this variant, I'd feel the idea would have been more refined. As is, I think it's alright.
Come on, Bon. Let's go where our tastes can be appreciated.
bringing up the rear, Fred.
He's a man who's not afraid to let you watch him when he bathes. Betty's naked, Bam Bam's in trouble. It's just another day in the life of the rebels.
Just 1 year after there aired a series of shorts between commercials called The Rubbles. It was a parody of the Osbournes reality show, and much like any reality show, it's terrible. This is nothing more but turning the neighborhood goofball Barney into a complete asshole. Bad characterization aside, as its own thing, there's no jokes beyond, hey, it's a reality show parody and sometimes we bleep out swears.
What the? Betty, this remote's a piece of shit.
Easy, Barney. It just needs a new battery.
There's not much else to say. If you don't remember this from 2002, that's because it only aired in Latin American countries on Cartoon Network, not Adult Swim despite its edgier nature. This was done by Hookup Animation, who often did promos for the channel over there. While these didn't air in my territory, they still use the American voice actors in their English-speaking promos. Some of these bumpers are really creative. It's a shame we never got these here.
Dos golpes se dio en el pecho y Muriel trató de llamar, pero su ataque era ya un hecho que nadie pudo evitar. Sin tocar a la puerta apareció la huesuda, reclamando su preciado botín.
All I can say is this better be funny.
The Flintstones afterwards went underground, occasionally popping up in random cameos in the typical Fruity Pebbles commercial. But in 2011, it was announced Family Guy creator Seth MacFarlane would reboot the series for Fox. In a way, it made sense. Our modern animated families wouldn't exist if it weren't for the Flintstones, but many were worried Seth would turn this classic into a raunchy comedy like Family Guy, although he clarified his take would be respectful and have some mild edge on the level of mid-90s Simpsons. When asked if he was worried about sullying the Flintstones' reputation, Seth replied, "I can't screw it up any worse than Viva Rock Vegas."
No reason to mess with it. You don't want to mess with the Flintstones theme song. The characters will, they'll look the same. The only thing that really will change is the stories that you're telling. What's the animal version of an iPod? These are the things we have to figure out.
News of the reboot was met with outrage online, as with anything. No one ever looks forward to any reboots, even the good ones. Surprisingly, the hate went beyond the internet. The Flintstones outrage even spawned an Aqua Teen Hunger Force episode on the topic. Season 9, Episode 5, The Granite Family. An episode where Master Shake is watching a legally distinct show that's not based on any pre-existing classic animated sitcom, The Granite Family. But Shake finds the show too outdated for modern audiences.
Try paying off your student loans with this gig.
This has absolutely no connection to my or anyone else I know's life.
Well, the show was written in the 50s.
Well, now, don't you think that they would factor that in before they put it on TV in front of me here in the year 2000?
It's a rerun.
Shake eventually meets a time traveler named the Time Warner, who warns people about future events and plans for a Granite Family revival of his own.
Because I'm going to the future to sell the Granite Family remake to this Fox.
Woohoo! It's a real middle finger of an episode that probably makes no sense without prior knowledge. Regardless of outrage, Seth MacFarlane's reboot was scheduled for 2013, but currently no episodes, clips, not even a piece of concept art was ever made public. Some people pass around this image claiming it's the reboot, but that's just part of some Family Guy sketch. All that really exists is a teaser trailer that cuts between classic Flintstones footage, Family Guy gags about the Flintstones, Seth MacFarlane talking, and some text telling the audience that everybody must get Flintstoned. And that's all we ever got. Hey, here's a crazy idea. How about you wait until you finish something before you make a trailer? At least Guardian Spy showed people working on their cartoon. This is just a guy sitting on his ass like, yup, I'm gonna make something. And guess what? The release date of 2013 passed and nothing got made. So what happened? In a Reddit AMA, Seth stated he was having difficulty writing because he couldn't figure out how to make Fred different enough from Peter Griffin. I hope that's a joke response because otherwise I don't feel he understands Fred. While people mock both The Simpsons and Family Guy as ripoffs of the Flintstones, even though the Flintstones was a ripoff of the Honeymooners, Fred is nothing like Peter Griffin. I'd say his neighbor Barney is more of a Peter Griffin. If anything, Fred is comparable to Shrek. Shut up. As funny as those Shrek movies were, Shrek himself wasn't all that funny. The world around him was funny, while Shrek existed as the everyman. Shrek and Fred are both grumpy dads just putting up with problems both relatable and surreal, and that's where the comedy comes in. While the writing proved to be difficult, Seth still completed a script to episode 1, but the Fox Entertainment president Kevin Riley, quote, liked it, but didn't love it, and thus that script never got animated. From my perspective, it seems like a reboot that was announced from an impulse and fell apart the more Seth thought about it. At the time, he was on a winning streak. Seth had 3 cartoons going on, was making some movies, TV shows, and hosted the Oscars. He thought he could have it all. Could you blame him? Yes.
You're watching The Flintstones on Cartoon Network.
Oh, I have my story all set.
Yeah? What is it?
Well, I'll walk into the house, right up to Betty, and I'll say, Betty, Fred Flintstone made me quit my job today.
And then what?
I kill myself. What else?
Well, yabba dabba dooming the butt. Before we move on, I got some insider info about Flintstones on the rocks. Apparently, the studio felt it was too negative, while audiences didn't care about the Stone Age family. And no, it was not intended for Adult Swim. The crew working on it weren't aware they were making anything subversive or offensive, which my source assumes that was the problem. The special was pitched by David Smith and Chris Savino, who weren't fond of Pebbles and Bam Bam, so it takes place before they were born. The designs were by Craig Kellman, who redesigned a lot of Hanna-Barbera characters at the time to reflect their earliest art styles. There were plans for a DVD and a making-of documentary. My source says, quote, I did a really embarrassing video shoot where they had a cameraman shooting footage from underneath my desk while I drew. I still get stupid chills just thinking about it. What? Yeah, that DVD never got made. After Flintstones on the Rocks was completed, the same crew moved forward with a Quick Draw McDraw special. They were given more creative freedom as the studio wasn't so protective of him. Unfortunately, the studio didn't care enough to complete the special, but a full storyboard exists somewhere. Another update, I got more info about Seth MacFarlane's Flintstones. The show would be roughly the same with a bit more raunch. Fred would drink and Wilma smokes. There are storyboards for several episodes finished, and 10 minutes of test animation was completed for investors, but not for broadcast. Fox rejected the Flintstones as they had enough animated shows, and Seth was too busy with his movies. Unrelated, I was also told there were plans for a CGI Flintstones movie to release after the 2010 Yogi Bear film, but because that bombed, it never got made. Tragic. So let's wrap up this video. Oh, and one last update, possibly. For the first time, actual art from the Seth MacFarlane Flintstones has been revealed. These backgrounds were found on the portfolio site of andyclark.us. Andy has given me permission to share these backgrounds that he colorized. For our last contender in 2016, Hanna-Barbera would work together with DC Comics to create Hanna-Barbera Beyond. Similar to all the Adult Swim reimaginings of the early 2000s, Beyond was just that in comic book form. The wacky racers now drive through a Mad Max-type future, Scooby-Doo fights in a mutant apocalypse, and the Flintstones is just something else. It's less about the family dynamic and more about the world building. Social commentary is stellar, but at times too blatant as the human race begins to organize a society. This causes a divide amongst people questioning the meaning of these strange new concepts like religion and marriage. Cavemen were doing fine without it, so why start now? Flintstones Beyond is exactly like that overly adult Power Rangers fan film. They're both total fan service and made by people who aren't fans of the source material. The difference is, Power Rangers Unauthorized is explicit for the sake of it. Yes, I know the director intended to mock Michael Bay or Zack Snyder style adaptations, but the film comes across as an imitation rather than a parody. It failed because people in the comments think the Black Rangers snorting coke is a good idea, and superheroes are too silly unless they have blood and titties. No, you're supposed to enjoy this ironically, not unironically. On the other hand, Flintstones Beyond uses the mature nature for commentary reasons. There's edgy on purpose, and then there's edgy for a purpose. This isn't funny kids cartoon swears on Newgrounds or some BS.
Wow, look at what you're wearing, dickhead. Nice wool hat. Oh, and sunglasses at night. Yeah, that's not too fucking affected.
Get out of here.
Beyond was written by Mark Russell, who had a booth next to us when we attended MomoCon 2018. Mark has admitted he hates the Flintstones, but jokingly took the job just to mock Flintstones vitamins. But why adapt a property you hate? I'm assuming he saw the potential in the setting and wanted to write his own take on it. I think we've all watched or read something we didn't like and thought about how we'd do it differently. Rocket Power's a stupid show, but if I could, I would make my own demented extreme version of it. After this comic, many of the Flintstones characters, as well as the appliances, you'll see in a whole new fleshed out light. And you know I love me some fleshlights. With great characters and commentary, Flintstones Beyond is one of the best things I actually bothered to read. I don't read too many comics, only like 2, including this one, but if I read other comics, I probably would still say the same thing.
I had no idea.